The woman who walked into Reno, Nevada, that scorching July afternoon in 1878, wore black like a widow, but everyone knew she had never been married to the three men she had buried. Tessa Hawthorne moved through the dusty street with her head held high, ignoring the whispers that followed her like a shadow. Her auburn hair was pinned up beneath a modest bonnet, and her dress, though faded from too many washings, was clean and pressed. She carried a small leather satchel that held everything she owned in the world, which was not much at all. The stagecoach that had brought her from Sacramento had departed 10 minutes ago, leaving a cloud of dust that still hung in the hot, dry air. She had come to Reno because she had nowhere else to go. Her last employer, a rancher outside Sacramento, had dismissed her when his wife heard the stories. It did not matter that Tessa had done her job well, that she had kept their books accurate and their correspondence organized. The wife had heard about the deaths, and that was enough. 3 men dead. 3 men who had courted her, proposed to her, and died before they could marry her. The first had been thrown from a horse. The second had caught pneumonia. The third had been shot in a dispute over a card game. None of it had anything to do with Tessa, but people saw patterns where there were only coincidences. They whispered that she was cursed, that she was poison to any man who loved her. Tessa had stopped trying to explain years ago. She had learned that once people made up their minds about you, facts became irrelevant. So she kept moving, kept working, kept surviving. Reno was supposed to be a fresh start, a place where nobody knew her story. She should have known better. The telegraph lines carried news faster than any stagecoach, and small towns loved nothing more than gossip. By the time she found the boarding house on 2nd Street, the proprietor looked at her with suspicious eyes. "You that Hawthorne woman, Mrs.?" Pritchard asked, her thin lips pursed in disapproval. "I am Tessa Hawthorne, yes," she replied evenly. "I was told you had a room available. Had is the right word, just rented it out this morning." "I see." Tessa kept her voice calm, though her heart sank. "Can you direct me to another boarding house? Can't say I know of any with vacancies." The lie was obvious, but what could Tessa do? She nodded politely and turned to leave. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as she walked the streets of Reno, her satchel growing heavier with each step. She tried 2 more boarding houses and received similar responses. By the time she reached the edge of town, near the stockyards, she was exhausted, thirsty, and fighting back tears of frustration. That was where Lucas Quinn first saw her. He had been working since dawn, breaking in a particularly stubborn bay mare, and was covered in dust and sweat. At 26, Lucas was lean and strong from years of ranch work, with dark hair that fell past his collar and eyes the color of river stones. He had a reputation in Reno as a man who kept to himself, worked hard, and was fair in his dealings. He ran a small horse ranch just outside town, breeding and training horses that were known throughout Nevada for their quality and temperament. Lucas had just finished loading supplies into his wagon when he noticed the woman in black standing near the water trough. She was swaying slightly on her feet, and even from a distance, he could see the exhaustion in the line of her shoulders. Without thinking, he grabbed his canteen and walked over. "Madam, you all right?" Tessa looked up, startled. Her first instinct was to say she was fine, to maintain the pride that had kept her going through so much rejection. But the concern in his gray eyes seemed genuine, and her throat was so dry she could barely swallow. "I could use some water," she admitted. Lucas handed her the canteen without hesitation. "Take all you need." She drank gratefully, trying not to gulp it down too quickly. The water was warm but tasted better than anything she had had in days. When she finished, she wiped her mouth and handed it back. "Thank you. That was very kind. You look like you have been walking in this heat for a while. You need a ride somewhere. I need a place to stay, but it seems Reno is not welcoming visitors today. She tried to keep the bitterness out of her voice but did not quite succeed. Lucas studied her for a moment. He had heard something at the general store earlier, some gossip about a woman arriving on the stage, but he had not paid much attention. He never had much patience for town gossip. You have money for rent? I do. Can you cook? The question surprised her. Yes. I can also keep books, read and write correspondence, and manage a household. Lucas made a decision that would change both their lives. I have a spare room at my ranch. My housekeeper quit last month to move back east with her daughter. Place is a mess, and I cannot cook worth a damn. If you are willing to work, you can stay there and I will pay you a fair wage on top of room and board. Tessa stared at him, searching his face for the trap, for the ulterior motive. She had learned to be suspicious of kindness, especially from men. But all she saw was straightforward honesty and perhaps a touch of loneliness that mirrored her own. You do not know anything about me. I know you need help and I need help. Seems like a fair trade. He paused. Unless you are running from the law or something like that. I am not a criminal. Then I reckon we have a deal if you are willing. She thought about her dwindling funds, about the hostile faces at the boarding houses, about sleeping in the street. She thought about the fact that this stranger had offered her water and help without asking for anything in return. I am willing to try, Mr. Quinn, Lucas Quinn, and you are Tessa Hawthorne. If he recognized the name, he gave no sign. He simply nodded and gestured toward his wagon. Let me help you with your bag. The ride to the Quinn ranch took about 30 minutes, following a dusty road that led into the foothills. Tessa sat beside Lucas on the wagon bench, very aware of his presence but grateful that he did not seem inclined to make idle conversation. She was too tired for pleasantries, and too wary to let down her guard just yet. The ranch, when they arrived, was more substantial than she had expected. The house was a sturdy two-story structure made of wood and stone, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front and side. Behind it, she could see a large barn, several corrals, and what looked like a bunkhouse. In the corrals, about a dozen horses grazed or dozed in the afternoon heat. It is not fancy, Lucas said as he helped her down from the wagon, but it is solid. Built most of it myself over the past 5 years. It is lovely, Tessa said honestly. After the rejection she had faced in town, the ranch felt like a sanctuary. Lucas carried her satchel up to the porch and opened the front door. The interior was dim and cool, a relief after the heat outside. The main room was spacious, with a stone fireplace, a worn sofa, and a large wooden table covered with papers, books, and what looked like several days' worth of dirty dishes. Told you it was a mess, Lucas said, looking embarrassed. The spare room is upstairs, first door on the right. It has a bed and a dresser, and the linens are clean. I will give you time to settle in, and then maybe you can tell me what you need to make this arrangement work. Tessa followed him up the stairs, noting the solid construction and the care that had gone into building the house. The spare room was small but clean, with a window that looked out over the corrals. The bed had a simple iron frame, and someone had indeed left clean sheets folded at the foot of it. The washroom is at the end of the hall, Lucas said. I will bring up some water for washing. Take your time. After he left, Tessa sat down on the bed and finally let herself feel the full weight of the day. She had been so close to having nowhere to go, no options left. And then this stranger, this cowboy who did not know her from Eve, had offered her sanctuary without asking anything but honest work in return. She wondered how long it would last. How long before someone in town told him about the curse, about the dead men. How long before he looked at her with suspicion and fear instead of simple human kindness. She unpacked her few belongings and washed her face and hands in the basin Lucas brought up. Then she went downstairs, rolled up her sleeves, and got to work. Lucas was outside tending to the horses when he heard the sounds of activity from inside the house. The clatter of dishes, the splash of water, the sweep of a broom. He smiled slightly and returned to his work, thinking that maybe his impulsive decision had not been so foolish after all. By the time he came in for supper, the transformation was remarkable. The table was cleared and scrubbed, the dishes washed and put away, the floor swept clean. Something was cooking on the stove that smelled better than anything he had managed in weeks. Tessa was stirring a pot, her hair still pinned up but with a few curls escaping around her face. She had removed her black jacket and stood in her simple dress, looking more relaxed than she had in town. "I hope you like stew," she said without turning around. "I found vegetables in your root cellar and some salted beef. It is simple but filling. Sounds perfect." Lucas washed his hands at the pump and sat down at the table. "You did not have to clean the whole house today. You must be exhausted." "I needed to keep busy." She ladled stew into 2 bowls and brought them to the table, along with fresh bread she must have made from the supplies in his pantry. "Besides, I wanted to earn my keep." They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Lucas found himself studying her when he thought she was not looking. She was pretty, he realized, though she seemed to try to hide it. Her face was delicate but strong, with high cheekbones and a determined chin. Her eyes were a deep brown, almost amber in the lamplight, and held a wariness that spoke of too much disappointment. "This is the best meal I have had in months," he said honestly. "You are a good cook. Thank you. My mother taught me before she died. I am sorry. It was a long time ago." Tessa took a sip of water. "What about you? You said you built this place yourself, mostly." "I had help with the heavy timber work, but I did the rest. Bought the land 5 years ago with money I saved working cattle drives. Always wanted my own place, somewhere I could breed and train horses proper." "It is a good dream. What about you? What are your dreams?" The question caught her off guard. Nobody had asked her that in a very long time. "I suppose I dream of a place where I belong, somewhere I can stay without having to leave when people decide they do not want me around." Lucas heard the pain beneath the carefully neutral words. "Why would people not want you around?" Tessa hesitated. She could lie, could make up some story, but something about this man made her want to be honest. "Because they think I am cursed. They say any man who loves me dies." Lucas set down his spoon and looked at her steadily. "And is it true?" 3 men courted me. 3 men died. But I did not kill them, if that is what you are asking. 1 fell from a horse, 1 caught pneumonia, and 1 was shot in an argument that had nothing to do with me. But people do not care about the details. They just want someone to blame when tragedy happens. That is a heavy burden to carry. I have learned to carry it." Tessa met his gaze directly. "But I thought you should know in case you want me to leave. I will not hold it against you. You have been kinder than most." Lucas thought about it for a moment, really thought about it. He had seen enough of life to know that bad luck happened, that coincidences piled up in ways that looked like patterns. He had also seen enough of people to know that they were quick to judge and slow to show mercy, especially to women who did not fit their narrow expectations. "I do not put much stock in curses," he said finally, "and I do not plan on courting you, so I reckon I am safe enough." Tessa did not know whether to feel relieved or oddly disappointed by his matter-of-fact response. "Then I can stay." "As long as you want, provided you keep cooking like this and do not mind dealing with a dusty cowboy who is not much for conversation." "I think I can manage that." They finished their meal in a silence that felt less lonely than either of them had experienced in a long time. The days fell into a comfortable rhythm. Lucas rose before dawn to tend the horses, and Tessa had breakfast ready when he came in. She kept the house clean, managed his correspondence with buyers and suppliers, and cooked meals that made him wonder how he had survived on his own for so long. In the evenings, they sat on the porch and watched the sun set over the mountains, sometimes talking, sometimes just being. Lucas found himself looking forward to coming inside, knowing she would be there. He liked the way she hummed while she worked, liked her quiet competence and quick mind. When he discovered she could read well, he started bringing her books from town, and they would discuss them over dinner. She was smart and thoughtful, with opinions about things most women in Reno would not even discuss. Tessa found herself relaxing in ways she had not in years. Lucas was a man of his word, never making her uncomfortable, never taking advantage of their situation. He treated her with respect and a gentle courtesy that made her heart ache with something she did not want to name. She told herself it was just gratitude, just appreciation for being given a chance. But she noticed things about him too. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, which was not often but was always genuine. The gentleness with which he handled the horses, even the difficult ones. The fairness with which he dealt with the ranch hands who came by for work. It was almost 3 weeks before the town's poison reached their sanctuary. Lucas had gone into Reno for supplies, something he did once or twice a month. He usually made quick work of it, not being fond of the crowds and gossip that went with town life. But this time, as he was loading bags of feed into his wagon, he was approached by Harold Patterson, who owned the neighboring ranch. "Quinn," Patterson said, his expression serious. "Need to have a word with you, Patterson." Lucas continued loading the feed. "What about? About that woman you have got staying at your place, the Hawthorne woman." Lucas stopped what he was doing and turned to face Patterson fully. "What about her? You know what people are saying." "About the men she killed." "She did not kill anyone." "That is not what I heard. 3 men dead, all of them involved with her. That is not coincidence, Quinn. That is a pattern. That is superstition and gossip." Lucas kept his voice level, but there was steel underneath. "Miss Hawthorne is my housekeeper. She does her job well, and what happens at my ranch is my business. It becomes everyone's business when you are bringing a curse down on this town. My wife will not even come into Reno anymore. She is so worried. Other women are talking about getting the preacher involved, maybe even the sheriff." "The sheriff?" Lucas almost laughed. "On what charge? Being unlucky. Last I checked, that was not against the law." Patterson stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Look, I am not saying she is a witch or anything like that. But sometimes women carry bad luck with them, especially ones who have been with that many men. It is not natural. You are a good man, Quinn. You have worked hard for what you have got. Do not throw it away on some woman who will only bring you trouble." Lucas felt anger rising in his chest, hot and righteous. "We are done here, Patterson, and you can tell anyone else who is interested that I do not give a damn what they think about my choices. Good day." He finished loading his wagon and headed home, his jaw tight with fury. Not at Tessa, but at the small-minded fools who could not see past their own superstitions. He had seen how hard she worked, how much she had been hurt by the judgment of others. The thought of her facing more of that poison made him want to put his fist through something. When he got back to the ranch, Tessa was in the kitchen kneading bread dough. She took one look at his face and knew something was wrong. "What happened?" Lucas set down the supplies more forcefully than he intended. "Town is talking. About you, about the so-called curse. Patterson cornered me, said people are worried." Tessa felt her heart sink. She had known this was coming, had been bracing for it every day, but it still hurt. "I should leave." "The hell you should." "Lucas, no." He turned to face her, his gray eyes blazing with an intensity she had never seen. You have done nothing wrong. You have worked hard, kept to yourself, hurt nobody. I will not let them drive you out because they are too ignorant to know the difference between bad luck and malice. It does not matter what the truth is if they believe the lie. You will lose business. Your neighbors will turn against you. Then they are not neighbors worth having. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to calm down. I am sorry. This is not your fault. I just hate seeing good people punished for things they did not do. Tessa felt something shift inside her chest, something warm and dangerous. She had been telling herself for weeks that she could not afford to feel anything for Lucas Quinn beyond gratitude. That the curse, real or imagined, meant she could never let herself care about anyone again. But looking at him now, seeing him defend her so fiercely, she knew she was already past the point of no return. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly. "You could have left me in town. You could have sent me away the moment you heard the stories. Why do you keep defending me?" Lucas looked at her, really looked at her, and realized he had been avoiding this question for weeks, because the answer scared him more than any superstition or town gossip. "Because you matter to me," he said simply. "Because when I come in from working and see you here, this place feels like a home instead of just a house. Because you are smart and kind and stronger than anyone I have ever met, and the fact that people cannot see that makes me want to fight them all." Tessa could not breathe. Nobody had ever said anything like that to her, not even the men who had claimed to love her. They had wanted her, had been drawn to her pretty face or her domestic skills or simply the idea of having a wife. But Lucas saw her, really saw her, and still thought she was worth defending. "Lucas, I care about you too, but that is exactly why I should leave. I cannot bear the thought of something happening to you because of me. Nothing is going to happen to me. You do not know that. 3 men were unlucky. Tessa, people die every day out here. They fall from horses, they catch diseases, they get shot in stupid arguments. None of that has anything to do with you loving them or not loving them. It is just life in the West, hard and unforgiving. But what if you are wrong?" Her voice broke slightly. "What if there is something about me, some darkness that follows me? I could not live with myself if you died because you were kind to me." Lucas crossed the space between them in 2 strides and took her hands in his. They were soft and strong at the same time, dusted with flour from the bread she had been making. "Listen to me. I have broken wild horses, survived cattle stampedes, and lived through winters that killed weaker men. I am not afraid of some made-up curse. The only thing I am afraid of is letting you walk away when I know damn well I am falling in love with you." Tessa gasped. "You should not say that." "Why not? It is true. I have been trying to ignore it, trying to tell myself I just appreciate having a good housekeeper, but that is a lie. I love the way you sing when you think I cannot hear you. I love how you argue with me about books and politics and everything else. I love how brave you are, how you keep going even when the world keeps trying to knock you down. I love you, Tessa Hawthorne, and I do not give a damn what anyone else thinks about it." Tears were streaming down Tessa's face now. "I love you too. God help me, I love you too, but I am so scared." Lucas pulled her into his arms and she went willingly, burying her face against his chest. He smelled like horses and leather and sun-warmed cotton, and she had never felt safer in her life. "Then we will be scared together," he murmured into her hair. "But we will be together. That is all that matters." They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the kitchen while the bread dough rose forgotten on the counter. When Tessa finally pulled back, her eyes were red but determined. "The town will make your life difficult. Let them try. You really want to fight this battle?" "For you, I would fight 100 battles." Tessa laughed through her tears and reached up to cup his face in her floury hands. You are either the bravest man I have ever met or the most foolish. Can I be both? I think you might be." She kissed him then, soft and tentative at first, then deeper as he responded. It was her first real kiss in years, and it felt like coming home. When they finally broke apart, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "Will you stay? Not as my housekeeper, but as the woman I am courting properly." "People will say terrible things. People already say terrible things. At least this way we will face them together. Then yes, I will stay." The battle lines were drawn that Sunday when Lucas and Tessa drove into Reno together for church services. Lucas had pressed his best suit, and Tessa wore her only good dress, a dark blue calico that brought out the amber in her eyes. They walked into the small church side by side, and the reaction was immediate. Women whispered behind their hands. Men stared openly. The preacher, Reverend Thompson, paused in his greeting of parishioners at the door, his smile faltering. "Mr. Quinn, Miss Hawthorne." "Reverend." Lucas kept his hand lightly on Tessa's back, a gesture of support and possession both. "Good to see you." They took a seat in the middle of the church, and Lucas noticed how people shifted away, leaving an empty space around them like they carried disease. His jaw tightened, but Tessa squeezed his hand, a silent reminder to stay calm. The service was tense. Reverend Thompson preached about avoiding temptation and the dangers of association with those who brought sin into the community. His eyes kept drifting to where Lucas and Tessa sat, and his meaning was clear enough. After the service, as people filed out, Lucas and Tessa found themselves facing a small group of women led by Constance Patterson, Harold's wife. She was a severe woman in her 50s, with thin lips and cold eyes. "Mr. Quinn," she said sharply, "we need to speak with you." "Mrs. Patterson, it has come to our attention that you are harboring a woman of questionable character. We are concerned for your soul and for the safety of our community." "My soul is my own concern," Lucas replied evenly. "And Miss Hawthorne has done nothing to threaten anyone's safety. She has left 3 men dead in her wake. 3 men died of circumstances that had nothing to do with her. You are spreading malicious gossip without a shred of proof." "The proof is in the pattern," another woman chimed in. "No woman is that unlucky unless there is something unnatural at work." Tessa had been silent, but now she spoke up, her voice steady despite the fear she felt. "I understand your concern, truly I do. I cannot imagine how it must look to have someone like me in your town. But I swear to you on my mother's grave that I have never wished harm on anyone. I did care for those men, and their deaths broke my heart. If I could change what happened, I would. But I cannot. All I can do is live my life as honestly as I can and hope that someday you might see me as a person rather than a curse." Some of the women looked uncertain, moved by the sincerity in her voice. But Constance Patterson was unmoved. "Pretty words do not change facts. I am calling for a town meeting to discuss this matter properly. We need to decide whether Reno will tolerate such a presence in our midst." "This is not the Dark Ages," Lucas said angrily. "You cannot drive someone out of town because you do not like them. We can certainly express our concerns and make it clear that certain people are not welcome in decent society." Constance looked at Tessa with cold disdain. If she had any shame, she would leave of her own accord. "I have plenty of shame," Tessa said quietly. "I carry it every day, but I am tired of running. I am tired of being punished for things I did not do. So no, Mrs. Patterson, I will not leave, not unless Mr. Quinn asks me to." "Then you are as shameless as they say." "That is enough." Lucas stepped forward, putting himself slightly between Tessa and the angry women. "Miss Hawthorne is under my protection. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly. But I warn you, I am not nearly as patient as she is. He took Tessa's arm and led her away, leaving the cluster of women whispering furiously behind them. As they climbed into the wagon, Tessa was shaking. "I am sorry," she said. "That was awful. You did nothing to apologize for. You were dignified and honest. They are the ones who should be ashamed." Lucas urged the horses forward. "But I think we should prepare for that town meeting. They are not going to let this go easily. Maybe I should leave after all. I do not want to destroy your standing in the community." "My standing is not worth a damn if it means abandoning you. We are in this together, remember." Tessa nodded, but her heart was heavy. She had seen this pattern before, the way communities could turn against someone they decided was an outsider, a threat. She did not want Lucas to suffer because of her. The town meeting was called for the following Tuesday evening at the church. Lucas and Tessa arrived together, and the building was packed. It seemed like everyone in Reno had turned out for the spectacle. Lucas could feel the hostility in the air, thick and oppressive. Reverend Thompson called the meeting to order and immediately gave the floor to Constance Patterson. She stood at the front of the church, her face grim with righteous certainty. "My friends, we are gathered here tonight to discuss a threat to our community. For those who do not know, there is a woman living among us who brings death wherever she goes. 3 men have died after becoming involved with her. 3. This is not coincidence. This is evidence of something dark and unnatural." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Tessa sat with her hands clenched in her lap, trying to remain calm. Lucas sat beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. "I have investigated Miss Hawthorne's history," Constance continued. "The first man, Thomas Wright, was thrown from his horse and broke his neck just days after proposing to her. The second, Benjamin Mills, caught pneumonia and died within a week of announcing their engagement. The third, Robert Carlson, was shot dead in an argument at a saloon the night he bought her a ring." The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. Constance looked around at them, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "This is not natural. This is the work of something evil, and we must protect ourselves and our families. I propose that we formally ask Miss Hawthorne to leave Reno for the good of our community." More murmurs, louder now. Lucas stood up and the crowd quieted. "May I speak?" Reverend Thompson looked uncomfortable but nodded. "You may, Mr. Quinn." Lucas walked to the front, his boots echoing on the wooden floor. He turned to face the assembled townspeople, his gray eyes sweeping over familiar faces that now looked at him with suspicion. "I have lived in this community for 5 years. I have done business with most of you, hired your sons for ranch work, bought supplies from your stores. In all that time, have I ever given you reason to doubt my judgment or my character?" "No one is questioning your character, Lucas," Harold Patterson called out. "We are questioning your judgment. That woman has bewitched you somehow." "I am not bewitched. I am in love, and there is a difference." Lucas let that sink in. "Yes, I love Tessa Hawthorne. I love her because she is kind and brave and honest. I love her because when the whole world turned against her, she did not become bitter or cruel. She just kept going, kept working, kept hoping that someday someone would see her as a person rather than a superstition." He paused, looking at Constance. "You say 3 men died after becoming involved with her. Let me tell you what actually happened, based on facts rather than gossip. Thomas Wright was known to ride horses that were too green, too wild. Everyone who knew him said he was reckless. He died doing something dangerous that he had been warned about many times. That is not a curse. That is poor judgment. Benjamin Mills worked in the silver mines. He was constantly exposed to dust and chemicals, and he lived in a boarding house with poor ventilation. Half the miners in Nevada have lung problems. He caught pneumonia during one of the wettest winters on record. That is not a curse. That is bad luck and worse working conditions. Robert Carlson was shot by a man he owed money to, a gambling debt he had been dodging for months. The argument at the saloon was about that debt, not about Tessa. She was not even there. That is not a curse. That is the consequence of living beyond your means and making enemies. Lucas looked around at the crowd, seeing some faces softening, others still hard with prejudice. I have looked into all 3 deaths. I have talked to people who were there, who knew these men. And in every case, there was a rational explanation that had nothing to do with Tessa being some kind of witch or curse. The only curse here is the one you are creating by refusing to see the truth. Constance stood up, her face red with anger. You are blinded by lust, Mr. Quinn. You cannot see what is right in front of you. What I see is a woman who has been unfairly judged and condemned without trial. What I see is a community that would rather believe in fairy tales than face the uncomfortable truth that bad things happen for no reason at all. What I see is cowardice dressed up as righteousness. There was shocked silence at that. Nobody spoke to Constance Patterson that way, especially not in public. "How dare you?" she sputtered. "No, how dare you?" Lucas's voice was hard now. "How dare you destroy someone's life because you need a scapegoat for the randomness of death? How dare you call yourself Christian while spreading malice and fear? How dare you demand that an innocent woman be driven from her home because you are too small-minded to see past your own superstitions?" He turned to address the crowd again. "I am courting Tessa Hawthorne. I intend to marry her if she will have me, and if that means you all turn against me, so be it. I would rather stand alone with her than stand with a community that treats people this way." Lucas walked back to Tessa and took her hand. They stood together, facing the crowd. For a long moment, nobody moved or spoke. Then, from the back of the church, an elderly man stood up. Samuel Hart was one of the original settlers of Reno, respected by everyone. "I would like to say something," he announced in his gravelly voice. Reverend Thompson nodded. "Please, Mr. Hart." Samuel walked slowly to the front, leaning on his cane. He looked at Tessa with kind eyes. "Young lady, I knew Thomas right. Lucas is right about him being reckless. That boy thought he was invincible. I tried to buy that horse from him, told him it was too much for him to handle. He would not listen. His death was tragic, but it was not your fault. I also knew Benjamin Mills. Good kid, but he should never have worked in the mines. He had weak lungs from childhood. Everyone knew it was just a matter of time before the dust got him. I did not know Robert Carlson well, but I knew his reputation. He was in debt to half the men in this town. Somebody was going to shoot him eventually, engagement or no engagement." Samuel turned to face the crowd. "I have lived in this territory for 40 years. I have seen good people die young and bad people live to be old. I have seen children buried before their parents and parents buried before their time. There is no rhyme or reason to it, no pattern that makes sense. It is just life, hard and unpredictable. This young woman has been through enough without us adding to her pain. I for one will not be part of driving her out of town. Lucas Quinn is a good man, and if he sees something worth loving in her, then I trust his judgment more than I trust a bunch of frightened gossip." He looked directly at Constance Patterson. "Shame on you, Constance, for leading this witch hunt. Your husband is not here because he knows this is wrong. Half the people in this room know it is wrong but are too afraid to speak up. Well, I am too old to be afraid of anything except dying without doing the right thing. So I stand with Lucas and Miss Hawthorne. Who else will join me?" There was a long, tense silence. Then a woman near the middle stood up. Margaret Sullivan, a widow who ran the general store. "I will stand with them. I am tired of seeing women punished for things they did not do. Lord knows we get blamed for enough as it is." Another man stood. then another woman. Soon about half the church was on its feet, while the other half remained seated, their faces uncertain or disapproving. Constance Patterson looked around, seeing her support crumbling. "You are all fools," she spat. "When something terrible happens, do not say I did not warn you." She stormed out of the church, followed by a handful of her closest allies. The rest of the crowd began to disperse, some stopping to speak with Lucas and Tessa, others leaving without a word. Samuel Hart approached them, his weathered face creased in a smile. "You two are going to be just fine. It will take time for some folks to come around, but you have got more support than you think." "Thank you," Tessa said, her voice thick with emotion. "What you said meant everything. Just told the truth, young lady. That is all any of us can do." He patted Lucas on the shoulder. "You take care of her, son, and do not let the bastards get you down." As they drove home under a sky full of stars, Tessa leaned against Lucas's shoulder, feeling the weight of the evening settle over her. It had not been a complete victory, but it had been something. It had been people choosing to see her as human rather than a curse. "You were amazing tonight," she said softly. "The way you stood up for me, the things you said. I have never had anyone fight for me like that. You are worth fighting for." Lucas kissed the top of her head. "And Samuel Hart was right. We are going to be just fine. Do you really want to marry me? You said that in front of everyone." "I meant every word. If you will have me, if you can trust me not to die and prove them all right." Tessa laughed, surprising herself. "That is not funny." "It is a little funny." Lucas pulled the wagon to a stop and turned to face her. "Tessa Hawthorne, will you marry me? Will you be my wife? Not because you need a place to stay or because I need a housekeeper, but because we love each other and want to build a life together." Tessa felt tears streaming down her face again, but this time they were happy tears. "Yes, yes, I will marry you." Lucas kissed her then, deep and thorough, pouring all his love and promise into it. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "We should probably get home," Tessa said, her voice shaky. "Probably." But Lucas kissed her again anyway, because he could, because she was his and he was hers, and the whole damn town could talk all they wanted. The wedding took place 3 weeks later in the same church where the town meeting had been held. It was a deliberate choice, a way of reclaiming that space and that moment. About half the town showed up, which was more than Tessa had dared to hope for. Samuel Hart gave her away, and Margaret Sullivan stood as her witness. Tessa wore a simple white dress that Margaret had helped her sew, and Lucas wore his best suit with a new string tie. When Reverend Thompson asked if anyone objected to the union, there was a tense moment of silence. Constance Patterson was there, sitting in the back with her supporters, but even she did not dare speak up. "Then, by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. Lucas, you may kiss your bride." And he did thoroughly, to the cheers and applause of those who had chosen to support them. Tessa felt like her heart might burst with happiness. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and lanterns strung between the barn and the house. People brought food and drink, and someone had a fiddle. It was not fancy, but it was real, filled with genuine warmth and celebration. As the sun set and the dancing began, Lucas pulled Tessa close and swayed with her to the music. "Happy?" he asked. "More than I ever thought possible. I keep waiting to wake up and find it was all a dream." "It is real. We are real." Lucas spun her around, making her laugh. "And I plan to spend the rest of my life proving to you that you deserve all the happiness in the world. You are going to spoil me. That is the idea." They danced until the stars came out, surrounded by people who had chosen to believe in them rather than in curses and superstitions. It was not a perfect ending to their story, because life is not perfect. There were still people in town who whispered about Tessa, who made sure their husbands stayed away from the Quinn ranch. But those voices grew quieter as time passed, and nothing bad happened to Lucas. The first year of their marriage was filled with hard work and simple joys. Tessa continued to manage the household and the ranch's correspondence, but now she did it as Lucas's equal partner. They bought more land, expanded the horse breeding operation, and built a reputation for quality that extended far beyond Reno. Tessa found herself becoming part of the community in small ways. She helped Margaret at the general store during busy times. She brought food to families when someone was sick. She attended church with Lucas every Sunday, holding her head high despite the occasional cold shoulder. And slowly, grudgingly, people started to accept her. It helped that Lucas remained healthy and prosperous, his success a living refutation of the curse theory. It helped that Tessa was unfailingly kind and hardworking, never giving anyone cause for complaint beyond their initial prejudice. The real turning point came during the harsh winter of 1879. A blizzard hit Reno in February, the worst storm anyone could remember. Several families were caught unprepared, running out of food and fuel as the snow piled higher and higher. Lucas and Tessa opened their ranch to anyone who needed shelter. They turned the bunkhouse into a dormitory and the barn into a warming station for livestock. Tessa cooked for dozens of people, stretching their supplies as far as they would go. Lucas organized the men to dig out paths and check on isolated homesteads. One of the families they helped was the Pattersons. Constance arrived at the Quinn ranch looking humiliated and desperate, her wagon having broken down halfway to town. Tessa could have turned her away. Nobody would have blamed her. Instead, she welcomed Constance into her home, gave her dry clothes and hot food, and did not say a word about their past conflicts. By the time the storm passed and the roads were clear again, something had shifted between them. It was not quite friendship, but it was no longer open hostility. "Thank you for your hospitality," Constance said stiffly as she prepared to leave. "I know I do not deserve it after how I treated you. You were scared and looking for someone to blame. I understand that." Tessa handed her a basket of food for the journey home. "I hope we can move forward from here." Constance looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You are a better woman than I gave you credit for. I was wrong about you." It was not a full apology, but it was something. Word spread quickly about how the Quinns had helped everyone without judgment or grudges. After that, the whispers stopped almost entirely. People started to see Tessa as she was, not as the ghost story they had created. In the spring of 1880, Tessa discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. She had wanted children for as long as she could remember, but the old fear resurfaced. What if the curse was real? What if something happened to Lucas now that they were bringing a child into the world? Lucas found her crying in the kitchen one evening and pulled her into his arms. "What is wrong? Is the baby all right?" "The baby is fine." "I am scared, Lucas. What if people were right about me? What if loving me really does bring death?" "Tessa, listen to me. You have been my wife for almost 2 years. In that time, I have not even had a bad cold. I am healthy, happy, and more alive than I have ever been. The curse is not real, it never was. But what if, no?" Lucas tilted her face up to look at him. "We are not doing this. We are not going to spend our lives waiting for disaster to strike. We are going to be happy. We are going to raise this baby and love each other and build a life that makes all those years of suffering worth it. Do you trust me?" "Yes." "Then trust me when I say everything is going to be all right." Their son was born in December of 1880, a healthy boy with his father's gray eyes and his mother's determination. They named him Samuel Lucas Quinn, after the man who had stood up for them when it mattered most. The real Samuel Hart became the baby's honorary grandfather, visiting often and spoiling the child shamelessly. Tessa took to motherhood with the same competence she brought to everything else. Lucas was a devoted father, building a cradle by hand and spending hours just watching his son sleep. Their home was filled with laughter and love in a way that neither of them had experienced before. In the years that followed, they had two more children. A daughter, Emma Rose, born in 1882, and another son, James William, born in 1884. The ranch prospered. Lucas's horses became known throughout Nevada and beyond. Tessa managed the business side of things with a sharp mind for numbers and negotiation that impressed buyers and competitors alike. The children grew up healthy and happy, running wild on the ranch, learning to ride almost before they could walk. Samuel was quiet and thoughtful like his father, with a gift for working with animals. Emma was bold and curious, always asking questions and pushing boundaries. James was the charmer, able to talk his way out of trouble with a grin and a quick wit. Lucas never forgot how close he had come to never knowing Tessa, to letting her walk away that first day in Reno. Sometimes, watching her with their children or seeing her smile across the dinner table, he was overwhelmed by gratitude for his own stubbornness and willingness to ignore town gossip. Tessa never forgot the man who had seen her as a person when everyone else saw only a curse. She loved Lucas with a fierce devotion that never wavered, even during the inevitable hard times that came with ranch life. Droughts and harsh winters, sick horses and difficult customers, none of it mattered as long as they faced it together. By 1890, the Quinns were one of the most respected families in Reno. Their children were growing into capable young people. Samuel, at 9, was already helping his father with the horses. Emma, at 7, had announced her intention to become a teacher. James, at 5, was the darling of the town, charming everyone he met. One evening, as Tessa and Lucas sat on their porch watching the sunset, just as they had done so many years ago when she was his housekeeper, she leaned against his shoulder with a contented sigh. "Do you ever think about how different our lives could have been?" she asked. "All the time. If I had listened to the gossip, if I had let you leave that day, I would have missed out on everything that matters. I was so scared back then, scared of being hurt again, scared of hurting you." "I know, but you were brave enough to stay anyway." Tessa turned to look at him, this man who had changed her entire life by offering her a cup of water and a chance. His hair was starting to show threads of gray now, and there were lines around his eyes from squinting into the sun, but he was still the most handsome man she had ever seen. "I love you, Lucas Quinn. I loved you when I was too afraid to admit it, and I will love you until my last breath. And I love you, Tessa Quinn. You are the sweetest thing I ever tasted, and I will never get enough." He kissed her then, as thoroughly as he had on their wedding day, with all the passion and tenderness of a love that had been tested and proven true. From inside the house, they could hear their children laughing and arguing and living their lives with the confidence that came from being loved unconditionally. The town had said she was poison, but Lucas had drunk deep and found only sweetness. He had ignored the warnings and the whispers, choosing to believe in the woman herself rather than the stories told about her. And in return, she had given him a life richer and fuller than he had ever imagined possible. Years continued to pass in the way they do, marked by seasons and celebrations, challenges and triumphs. Samuel grew into a fine young man, taking over more and more of the ranch work as Lucas's back started to complain about too many years of hard labor. Emma went to San Francisco to study teaching, coming home with new ideas and a determination to improve the local school. James discovered a talent for horse trading that surpassed even his father's skills. The Quinn Ranch became a fixture of the community, a place where people knew they would be treated fairly and with respect. Tessa's reputation as a woman of character became so established that new residents had no idea she had once been whispered about as a curse. The old stories faded into legend, occasionally mentioned with embarrassment by those who had believed them. Constance Patterson, in her old age, actually became something like a friend. She never fully apologized for the pain she had caused, but she made it clear through her actions that she regretted her earlier judgment. She and Tessa sometimes sat together at church socials, two women who had learned that strength came in many forms. Samuel Hart lived to be 92, long enough to see all three Quinn children grown and starting families of their own. On his deathbed, he took Lucas's hand and smiled. "I told you that you would be just fine," he rasped. "You and that girl of yours." "Best decision you ever made standing up for her that night." "Best decision I ever made was offering her water and a ride," Lucas corrected gently. "The standing up for her part was easy. She was worth it." "She surely was. You raised fine children, built a good life." "Not bad for a cowboy and a woman everyone said was poison. Turns out she was the sweetest thing I ever tasted." Samuel laughed, then coughed. "Never change, son. Never change." He died that night peacefully, surrounded by people who loved him. At his funeral, Lucas and Tessa stood together, their children and grandchildren around them, and remembered the old man who had been the first to see the truth when everyone else was blinded by superstition. Lucas lived to be 74 years old, dying in 1926 in the bed he had shared with Tessa for 48 years. He passed away peacefully in his sleep, his hand in hers, surrounded by the family they had built together. His last words were, "I love you," directed at the woman who had been his partner through nearly 5 decades of joy and sorrow. Tessa mourned him deeply, but she did not break. She had learned long ago that she was stronger than people gave her credit for, that she could endure pain and loss and still find reasons to smile. She lived another 12 years, spending her time with her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, telling them stories about their grandfather and the ranch and the way things used to be. She died in 1938 at the age of 85 in the same bed where Lucas had died, in the house they had made into a home. Emma was with her, holding her hand just as Tessa had held Lucas's. "I am ready," Tessa said softly. "I have had such a good life, better than I ever dreamed possible. You and Papa built something amazing here. All of us, the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren, we are all here because you were brave enough to stay when everyone wanted you to leave." Tessa smiled. "I stayed because your father made me believe I deserved to be loved. He saw past all the fear and superstition and just saw me. That was the greatest gift anyone ever gave me. He loved you so much. And I loved him. I loved him from almost the first moment, though it took me a while to admit it. He was my courage when I had none of my own. He was my home when I had been homeless for so long. He was everything." Emma wiped away tears. "What do you want us to remember about you, Mama?" Tessa thought about it for a moment. "Remember that people can be wrong. Remember that love is stronger than fear. Remember that sometimes the thing everyone warns you against is exactly what you need. And remember that you are all proof that curses are not real, that love does not bring death, it brings life." She closed her eyes then, her breathing slowing. "Tell my babies I love them, all of them. And tell them their grandfather and I are together again." Those were her last words. Emma sat with her until the sun came up, holding her mother's hand and crying quietly. When she finally stood to tell the rest of the family, she looked at her mother's peaceful face and realized that Tessa Hawthorne Quinn had won. She had outlived the gossip and the fear. She had built a legacy of love and family that would continue for generations. She had proven, simply by living a good life, that all the poison had been in other people's minds, never in her heart. The funeral was one of the largest Reno had ever seen. 3 generations of Quinns gathered, along with friends and business associates from across Nevada and beyond. Person after person stood up to share stories of Tessa's kindness, her strength, her sharp mind and warm heart. Nobody mentioned curses or superstitions. Those old lies had been buried long ago, replaced by the truth of a life well lived. Samuel Quinn, now 57, and running the ranch with his own son, stood at his mother's grave and thought about everything she had overcome. The fear and prejudice, the loss and pain, all of it transformed into something beautiful by her refusal to give up and his father's refusal to let her face it alone. "They said you were poison," he said softly to the headstone, "but Papa knew better. He drank deep and found the sweetest thing he ever tasted. And because he was brave enough to ignore what everyone said, all of us are here. Thank you, Mama, for staying, for fighting, for loving us all so well." The ranch continued to thrive for decades after, passing through Quinn hands from generation to generation. Each new child heard the story of how their great-great-grandparents had met, how love had triumphed over fear, how one man's willingness to see the truth had changed so many lives. In time, Reno grew from a small western town into a bustling city. The old church where Lucas and Tessa had been married was replaced by a larger building. The Quinn Ranch was eventually sold, subdivided, turned into housing developments and shopping centers. But the story remained, passed down through the family like a precious heirloom. On summer evenings, when Quinn descendants gathered for reunions and celebrations, someone would always raise a glass and offer a toast. To Lucas and Tessa, who taught us that love is stronger than fear, that truth matters more than gossip, and that sometimes the thing everyone warns you against is exactly what you need. And everyone would drink, remembering the cowboy who had offered water to a thirsty stranger and ended up finding the love of his life. Remembering the woman who had been called poison but was really just someone who had been unlucky. And then, finally, blessed with the greatest luck of all. The town had said she was poison. The cowboy had drunk deep and found the sweetest thing he ever tasted. And from that choice, that moment of courage and compassion, had sprung a legacy of love that lasted long after both of them were gone. That was how the story ended, not with curses or tragedy, but with generations of children who carried their names and their values forward into a world that sometimes still needed reminding that people are more than the stories told about them. That love is a choice made every day, and that the bravest thing you can do is see someone for who they truly are rather than who everyone says they should be. Lucas and Tessa Quinn had been dead for decades, but their love story lived on. Proof that happiness earned through courage and faith is the sweetest victory of all. They had faced down fear and prejudice together, had built a life of meaning and purpose, and had left the world better than they found it simply by refusing to accept that any person could be poison to those who chose to love them. In the end, that was the real magic, the only magic that mattered. Not curses or superstitions, but the transformative power of one person choosing to believe in another when the whole world said they should not. That was the legacy of the Quinns, the lesson they taught through their example, the gift they gave to everyone who came after them. The cowboy and the woman the town called poison had proven that love, real love, is the antidote to everything.